He had the smile that could light up a room, the wit sharp enough to win over audiences night after night, and the career that most actors in Hollywood would have killed for. In the 1960s, Bob Crane was a household name, a television darling, and a man who seemed destined for long-lasting stardom. But his story didn't end with applause. It ended in a Scottsdale apartment, under circumstances so brutal, so puzzling, that decades later, people still whisper about what really happened. This is not just a story about a murder. It's the story of how Hollywood can crown you king one year and bury your legacy the next. Bob Crane didn't stumble into fame by accident. Born in Waterbury, Connecticut in 1928, he was the second of two children in a working-class family. From a young age, he loved music and performance. He took up the drums, and by his teenage years, he was already playing with local bands. That rhythm, that sense of timing, it would stay with him for life, not just behind the drum kit, but in the way he cracked jokes, landed punchlines, and improvised in front of a microphone. After high school, Crane enlisted in the Connecticut National Guard and played in military bands, sharpening his discipline and his stage presence. But his real ambition was entertainment. By the late 1950s, Crane had landed in Los Angeles. His weapon wasn't acting yet, it was radio. At KNX, a CBS affiliate, he became the voice that everyone woke up to. His morning show wasn't the typical music and weather routine. He made it theater. He imitated celebrities, cracked jokes, played drums live on air, and pulled in guests most radio stations could only dream of. He interviewed Bob Hope. He chatted with Marilyn Monroe. He joked with Charlton Heston. He was quick, he was funny, and he could carry a conversation with anyone. He became known as the man of 1,000 voices. Walt Disney himself called him the fastest wit in the West. By the early 1960s, Crane was more than just a radio DJ. He was a celebrity in his own right, and TV producers were listening. In 1961, Carl Reiner, creator of The Dick Van Dyke Show, happened to be a guest on Crane's radio program. Impressed by Crane's quick timing and charisma, Reiner gave him a shot. That small role, a smooth-talking husband, got laughs. And Hollywood noticed. Next came a recurring role on The Donna Reed Show, where Crane played a friendly neighborhood dentist. He wasn't yet a superstar, but he was dependable, likable, and easy to cast. Audiences responded. Then came the script that would change his life. Hogan's Heroes. When Crane first read it, he thought it was a war drama. The premise, a comedy set in a German POW camp, sounded almost absurd. How could you make jokes in a setting defined by suffering and war? But the show had a twist. The Allied prisoners were clever, resourceful, and always one step ahead of their bumbling German captors. It debuted in 1965, and it was an instant sensation. Hogan's Heroes ran for 6 seasons. Bob Crane, as Colonel Robert Hogan, became the charismatic ringleader of the operation, the smooth talker who always had a plan. He was nominated for Emmys, plastered on billboards, and featured in magazines across America. Lunchboxes carried his face. Advertisers wanted him. For millions of viewers, he was the heroic, clever colonel who could outsmart anyone. But as his fame skyrocketed, so did the cracks in his personal life. His fascination with photography started innocently enough. He bought cameras, tested lenses, and experimented with lighting. But as video technology advanced in the 1960s, his interests shifted from art to something much more personal. Then came John Henry Carpenter.
Flames licked the steel as he wrapped his hands around the .50 caliber. When the enemy advanced, he didn't panic. He aimed. He fired in careful arcs, not wild ones, cutting lines into a mass that wanted to swallow his friends whole. Shrapnel bit him.
The two became inseparable. They went to bars together. They hit nightclubs, with Crane's celebrity status drawing crowds. Carpenter often introduced himself as Bob's manager. In reality, he was more than that. He was the technical enabler of Crane's growing obsession. Bob began recording everything. He brought cameras on the road. He filmed his encounters. He wired hotel rooms with recording devices. For him, the camera stopped being a toy and became part of his identity. But to those around him, it looked like something darker. His co-stars began noticing his distraction on set. Friends saw him slipping away from family life. His first marriage, to Ann Terzian, collapsed after more than 2 decades. He remarried actress Patricia Olson, better known as Sigrid Valdis from Hogan's Heroes. But the same issues carried over. By the mid-1970s, Crane's career was struggling. Hogan's Heroes had ended. He took stage roles and minor TV appearances, but Hollywood wasn't calling the way it used to. Worse, whispers about his private life started reaching the press. Crane wanted to move forward. He told friends he was ready to cut Carpenter out of his life, but fate didn't give him the chance. June 1978, Bob Crane was 49 years old. He was performing in a stage comedy called Beginner's Luck at the Windmill Dinner Theater in Scottsdale, Arizona. Just weeks from his 50th birthday, He was talking about changes. Friends recalled him saying he was ready to divorce Patricia Olson. He wanted to end his partnership with Carpenter. He wanted a clean slate. But on June 29th, his co-star Victoria Ann Barry stopped by his apartment after he missed a lunch meeting. What she found would shock Hollywood. Bob Crane was lying in bed, lifeless. His head injuries were gruesome. Police suspected the murder weapon was a heavy camera tripod, an eerie symbol given Crane's obsession with recording. An electrical cord was also found nearby. But here's what puzzled investigators. The apartment wasn't ransacked. Nothing was stolen. No forced entry. Whoever killed Crane was someone he trusted, someone he had let in. Suspicion immediately fell on John Carpenter. He had flown into Phoenix just days earlier to spend time with Crane. The two had been seen together the night before, having dinner and reportedly watching some of their tapes. Carpenter claimed he returned to his own motel, but his timeline didn't add up. And then there was the car. Investigators found smears of blood inside Carpenter's rental car. It matched Crane's blood type, but in 1978, there was no DNA testing. Blood type alone couldn't prove guilt. And so, the case became a mess. The Scottsdale Police Department wasn't equipped for a case like this. They had no homicide unit, no forensic specialist on hand. The crime scene was mishandled from the start. Friends and family members entered the apartment before it was properly sealed, contaminating potential evidence with their fingerprints, hair and footprints. The equipment, the tapes, cameras and cables was seized, but without context, it became more of a media scandal than usable evidence. Tabloids seized on the revelations, painting Crane as a man consumed by deviant obsessions. Carpenter, meanwhile, denied involvement, and with no weapon, no DNA, and no airtight case, prosecutors refused to press charges. For over a decade, the case went cold. It wasn't until 1990 that the case was reopened. Advances in DNA testing gave investigators new hope. They reviewed old photographs of Carpenter's rental car and believed they saw biological material that might still be testable. In 1992, Carpenter was arrested. By 1994, he was on trial for Crane's murder. The prosecution's story was simple. Crane wanted to cut ties, and Carpenter snapped. They presented blood evidence from the car. They highlighted testimony from Crane's son, Scotty, who said his father had spoken about ending the friendship. They painted Carpenter as a hanger-on, who lost his place in Crane's life. The defense tore it apart. They pointed to the sloppy crime scene, the missing samples, the lack of a murder weapon. They emphasized that the supposed DNA fragment was never recovered, that the tripod theory was pure speculation. And they reminded the jury other people could have had motives. In the end, it worked. Carpenter was acquitted. He walked free, maintaining his innocence until his death in 1998. But for Crane's family, the trial solved nothing. The trial was agony for Crane's children. His son, Robert, described the experience as watching his father's life turn into tabloid theater. The courtroom wasn't focused on his Emmy nominations or his decades of radio success. It was focused on the tapes. Another son, Robert David, voiced suspicion that Patricia Olson, Crane's second wife, may have played a role. After all, Crane's will left his estate entirely to her, cutting out his children from his first marriage. Prosecutors never pursued her as a suspect, but the bitterness stuck. Scotty Crane defended his father's legacy, insisting that the tapes involved consenting adults, but the media had no interest in nuance. The narrative was set. Bob Crane was no longer the charming Colonel Hogan. He was the man with a secret, sensational double life. Hollywood, once so eager to celebrate him, went silent. His funeral in July 1978 drew nearly 200 mourners, including stars like Patty Duke and Carol O'Connor. His Hogan's Heroes castmates carried his casket, but in the years that followed, reruns dwindled and his name became synonymous with scandal. For his children, that was the cruelest cut. Even after Carpenter's acquittal, Scottsdale police never fully closed the file. With every leap in forensic technology, there was a flicker of hope. In 2016, Phoenix TV reporter John Hook convinced authorities to retest the remaining blood samples from Carpenter's rental car. Scientists used state-of-the-art methods, hoping that 21st century technology could succeed where 1970s detectives failed. The results were devastating. 2 male DNA sequences were found. One belonged to an unidentified man. The other was too degraded to draw any conclusion. And in the process, the last usable samples were consumed. The trail went cold again, permanently this time. For Bob Crane's family, closure never came. His son Robert described life after his father's death as living in a fog. Scotty, meanwhile, fought against Hollywood portrayals that reduced his father to a caricature. When the 2002 film autofocus dramatized Crane's life and death, Scotty pushed back hard, calling it inaccurate and sensationalized. He even launched a website to share documents and memories that showed a fuller picture of his father, not just a man of obsessions, but a man of warmth, humor, and immense talent. But the damage to Crane's reputation was done. For many, his name is forever linked to one of Hollywood's most infamous, unsolved murders. And so, the tragedy is twofold. Not only was Bob Crane's life cut short in a brutal way, but his legacy was rewritten by the very scandal he once hoped to leave behind. Bob Crane made millions laugh. He entertained audiences across radio, television, and stage. He was quick, sharp, endlessly charming. But today, when people hear his name, they don't think of the laughter. They think of the mystery. What really happened in Scottsdale that night in 1978? Was John Carpenter guilty, as many still believe? Was Patricia Olson more involved than anyone suspected? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone whose name we'll never know? Maybe the truth was lost the moment the crime scene was compromised. Maybe it lies buried in evidence that can never be retested. One thing is certain, Bob Crane's case remains one of Hollywood's darkest tragedies. A man who brought joy to millions, remembered not for his wit, but for the night his laughter went silent. What do you think? Was justice denied in 1994? Or was Bob Crane's killer someone we never suspected? Drop your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.